Hi everyone, my name is Joseph. Welcome to Digimon Seekers Chapter 4, Part 10, Sons of Chaos Seekers. So before we begin with the actual quotes, I just want to quickly elaborate. I know last week I said at the end of the video that I was excited to read Part 10, but I actually made the choice to not do that right away. I'm going to go ahead and wait about 5 to 6, maybe even 6 to 7 days, so the full week before I read the next part, just so I have something to look forward to. So Part 10 I did not read last Saturday, or Saturday evening, Sunday morning, but rather I waited to yesterday evening, this morning to read it and gather the quotes that I wanted to share with you guys. So yes, hopefully that makes sense. So beginning with the first quote, one need to be linked to a Digimon to control them. You code crackers do it all the time. All you need is a right suite of tools. No, Yulin yelled, shaking her head. It's one thing to restrain Doromon Wakoski's mind link, but engaging external control? That shouldn't be possible. But it is, precisely because they're mind linked, the professor said with a smile. The presence of Koski's consciousness in Doromon's Digicore is a gigantic backdoor. This is because of me? Koski wondered, looking down at his hands. His Digimon linker was sending two different signals. One obviously wasn't his. Tartarus, the legendary code cracker, was powerless. How weak are the brokenhearted, Professor Rudici said in his classic, overly dramatic way. Yolene and Iji tried to get Koski's attention. He heard none of the plaintive screams, their sympathetic appeals, their fury. He sank further inward. No words could heal his broken heart. Doromon too was powerless to resist and succumb to the. Doromon too was powerless to resist and succumb to the professor. They were nothing more than a puppet now. So at this point, unfortunately, the professor's taking control of Doromon. And he's actually not listening to Koski's commands anymore. And what I really like about this, just quick context, what I really like about this quote, the way that it ends, is just how Yolene, despite the fact that Koski was her rival slash enemy a couple parts before this, she's really willing to put this aside, and she still cares about Koski, I would argue. And of course, her and Iji, both of them trying to get his attention. I love, oops, excuse me, that was my cat. She knocked over my pin. I loved how, excuse me, she knocked over my chapstick into my pin. I have a metal pin. Excuse me, let me move the chapstick away. What was I saying? I liked how it states, he heard none of the plaintive screams, their sympathetic appeals, their fury. I think that's really awesome, the furies. Again, emphasizing how although the group might be caught off guard, Koski might be powerless, there's plenty of reason to not just be feeling anxiety and fear, but fury as well. And I really love how this part emphasizes on that little aspect to give one the agency that they need. And going back to Yolene, I'm going ahead a little bit, but I also enjoy how almost right away she starts giving advice to Iji, and Iji starts, even he states out loud, are you sure you want to help out, squad leader? But of course she does. She knows that this fight isn't between Koski and the others, but rather it's her and Koski and Iji with their Digimon against the professor. So she's keeping in mind that as of right now, they are working as a team. But yeah, excuse me, that was, I caught something from my cat. Excuse me, sorry about that. I had to clean my cat's eyes in case you guys don't notice. Or you might notice she has little black marks. I usually clean them in the morning, but I guess I forgot a little bit. That was was on my arm, so I brushed that aside. Anywho, let me make sure. I do feel extremely sympathetic towards Koski. I think the last part 9, did a good job of establishing how Koski's quickly losing it out of his agency because of the reveal that Saya is essentially dead. It's looking like she is dead, or at least as of right now, we can't assume anything else because in the last part, he being the professor, claims that she's dead, but that news really does devastate Koski, and we're seeing how it's still impacting him. And not only that, but one could really tell that he's feeling some guilt over the fact that he's serving as a backdoor. Maybe not on purpose, it was inadvertently, but still, I'm sure for Koski, he probably feels his goal slash dream was removed from him, and now his partnership slash friendship is being used. His relationship with Doromon is being used by a former mentor. I'm sure he feels a lot of betrayal currently, thus why he's really going within himself, really withdrawing. I am hoping that Koski will regain his composure. Hopefully he will. But I also am understanding and I could see why he is acting in this way. I don't think this makes Koski a weak individual whatsoever. I mean, we must keep in mind that Koski was set up the Sons of Chaos. He took up the name of Tartarus, and we don't know how exactly he started working with Doromon, but Koski had a plan that he wanted to enact to bring back Saya, and now all of a sudden everything's just falling out from under his feet. So I don't blame him whatsoever, and I still really do enjoy his characterization in addition to Yolene and Iji. Um, yep. So moving on to the next quote. I knew you'd understand. I'll personally guarantee your salary. Now, Professor Rijiji cut in, raising his arms in welcome. Then again, E.G. shrugged. I'm not the type to make decisions based on simple list of pros and cons, am I? Besides, it's like the professor said, the digital world can change lives. So it was for Koski Kesikata, his last name, excuse me, Shu Yulin, and Leon Alexander, whose lives were ruined by their encounters with Professor's forays into the digital world. To say nothing of Saya Ruzenji's death, which was now just a bargaining chip to her own father, E.G. wasn't about to endorse that behavior. E.G. has seen firsthand how the digital world brought people together around their adventures in a new world. It was a place that should change people's lives for the better. It could give life meaning. It could make time invaluable. It let people live their lives, and it was impossible to put a price on that. I came here in search of a way to emerge victorious. Excuse me, let me start over. I came here in search of a way to emerge victorious in the digital world. I wanted to change my life. I'm gonna find a way to leave my mark on this place. Because at the end of the day, I'm still a code cracker through and through. He raised his cells to the network winds and keep looking. I think that's a typo. Let me repeat that. He'd raise his cells to the networked winds and kept looking for a way to put his stamp on the digital world, with Logomon there at his side. They saved their friends and pressed onward together. What more could he want from life? You got to forge your own path, and Iji knew just how he was going to do it. So excuse me, I know that was quite a long quote. I'm not going to lie, the past few parts I've noticed that the quotes have been getting longer, and I've kind of been having fewer quotes. But I don't mind that whatsoever because I think there's a lot to unpack here. So as quick context, when the professor says, I need you to understand, that's him trying to convince Iji to work with him, to not fight him and Dorogomon. At this point, Dorogomon did evolve to his ultimate level, and so he's getting ready to fight Logomon head on. And he's trying to convince Iji to not do that. And he tries to convince him by offering him a role and position as serving as a mentor and having an actual role within DDL. And at first it looks like Iji is going to take it, and Logomon's even a little bit shocked about all of this. But then I'm trying to find the quote. I'm not the type to make decisions based on simple lists of pros and cons, am I? And something that seems like he should make, I like how the story says, a deal with the bargain, a bargain with the devil. I really appreciate how Iji starts thinking about the digital world and how supposedly it was this huge big deal, because supposedly it changed worlds. That's what the professor had said. And it's looking like this was true, but everyone's lives has been changed negatively, not because of the digital world itself, but because of what the professor is doing with the digital world. And I really appreciate how EG separates that from the professor's actions, that being the digital world, and EG highlights that the digital world itself, it's a good place. It helped to change EG's life. It helped to change Leon's life, Koski's life. It gave him a purpose and a go, and Yolene as well. And although they were working against one another, they were able to come together. And despite they themselves, we can't forget the fact that Yolene made her relationship, her friendship / professional relationship with excuse me, I forgot Satsuki. I like her too. Let me quickly look up her name. Yes, Satsuki, excuse me, because she hasn't been in the story for a couple parts. Satsuki Tamaheim. Again, that relationship only forged because of the fact that Yolene was working with Digimon, and the digital world also lost my place. Let me go back to the quote. Here we go. Koski with Marvin and the rest of the Sons of Chaos, and then EG meeting these. That sounded funny. Excuse me. EG meeting the Sons of Chaos and reconnecting his relationship with Leon. All of that was only possible and doable because of the digital world. And I love how EG focuses on that, and he states that he wants. Let me read it exactly. Um, It was a place that should change people's lives for the better. It could give life meaning, it could make time invaluable, and let people live their lives, and it was impossible to put a price on that. So I think the story did, I don't know if they did it on purpose, reminding the readers that the digital world is not corrupted, but rather who utilizes the digital world. That's what makes the corruption possible. In other words, maybe corruption is a little bit too dramatic, but essentially using the digital world for toxic means rather than using it as a way to build and foster a community. So I really appreciate that. Cause obviously, I appreciate that because I'm a big Digimon fan, and whenever there's an instance of highlighting again the positive relationships that could come from the Digimon and the human partner and the digital world and the real world, I'm always a big fan of any instances like that. As Sir Philip Sidney, not a philosopher, but a writer from the 18th, 17th century, way back when, I can't remember exactly. But essentially, he just states that the purpose of literature is to show us being the audience, what to do, what not to do, essentially serving as a play guide, kind of. Anywho, but yeah, let me make sure that's everything I want to read about this quote. Again, just emphasizing how Ichi has his personal agency, and he wants to use his agency for the community. They save their friends and press onward together. What more could you want from life? You got to forge your own path, and Ichi knew just how he was going to do it. Really awesome. Moving on, worry not, EG. You're absolutely correct about that, which is why I had to get back to work. Lucky for you, I can't afford to destroy your Digicore if I want to finish decrypting the source domain's data. Tell me, have you ever peered into hell? Alright, you lost your parents in an awful plane crash. Surely that gave you a glimpse. You, EG spluttered, the words catching in his throat. How do you feel about theme park rides? Would you like to experience the same fear and pain your parents felt? Perhaps you wouldn't feel so comfortable to find me if you did. I'll break you yet. EG couldn't square this side of the professor with the one he knew in his mind. The preeminent digital world researcher, a man worthy of EG's respect. The man who placed protection in the digital world and the Digimon within, the man who placed protection in the digital world and the Digimon within above all else. That outlook profoundly moved EG once upon a time, as did the ethos that any involvement with the digital world necessarily involved meddling in the lives of Digimon. Those are the thoughts of a man with reverence for the digital world, a love of the digital world that curdled into greed. Greed, the familiar motivator that instantly removes compassion from the equation. Suddenly, it didn't seem to matter how many people the professor hurt. He hadn't killed anyone, but he chewed them up and spat them out, leaving them a shell of their own former selves. It wasn't all that different in the end, yet he could still sleep at night and carry on ruining more lives the next day. He was a very human monster from the real world, and now he was loose in the digital world. EG wasn't about to be his next victim, but he also wasn't sure if he should try to cut a deal or flee. Neither option was appealing, but the alternatives were worse. So really, this passage really shows us how the professor. Well, so right off the bat, I do like how even EG remembers the past professor, the professor that I've been mentioning since the previous parts as well. How he has such a tonal shift with his behavior. The man who placed protection to the digital world and the Digimon within above all else. To see that individual now making these remarks, these hurtful remarks towards not just EG, but towards his formal peers, friends, and mentees, Yolene and Koski, it really was it caught me off guard. But as I said in the last part, despite it catching me off guard, I'm really loving how the professor is like fully embracing this villain side. And again, we're seeing how he's fully embracing it with this passage. The way he's saying, EG, have you ever seen hell? Oh, what am I saying? Your parents have died. So you got a brief glimpse of it, but too bad you don't have more of a experience with hell. Otherwise, you wouldn't be defying me, right? In other words, he's essentially saying, you're not afraid enough of me. Let's make you more scared. I'll break you yet, right? It's just a very mean, malicious, and vindictive thing to say. And villainous. It's a totally villainous thing to say. And I am enjoying this aspect of him. But despite me enjoying it, it is hard to square away who this individual used to be. He really did trick not just the the characters within the story, but also I would argue the audience. He did trick me, for example. Um, but what I also like about this quote is EG's apprehensiveness, despite his agency allowing him to continue fighting. I mean, quite literally, him and Logomon are shaking off symbolic chains that was restraining them. He still has a lot of feelings of, is this the correct thing to do? He wasn't sure if he should try to cut a deal or flee. Neither option was appealing, but the alternatives were worse. Again, that for me just really emphasizes how EG is observant, how EG just doesn't make actions willy nilly. He does think about it at first and then he makes a decision. As always, I know I've been saying this not as often, but I bring it up quite often how at the beginning of the story everyone said that EG was a stupid individual. I definitely don't think that's true, right? And again, the professor obviously doesn't believe that's true as well because he wouldn't be working with EG if he was a quote unquote stupid individual. But we're starting to see that it's biting the professor in the butt a little bit because I would argue that very gumption and drive, that agency that impressed the professor, it's what's allowing EG to rebel, counter, and fight back against the professor. So the very qualities the professor admired is what's preventing EG from just being complacent, obedient, and just serving the professor. So yeah, I do like that. I also enjoy how EG rationalizes that while maybe true the professor hasn't killed anyone technically, he essentially has done the next closest thing. To kill someone is to kill them physically, but you could also kill someone emotionally, kill someone psychologically. And that's exactly what the professor is doing with Koski currently. Unfortunately, I would argue that Koski is having a slow inward death, but again, hopefully he'll come out of it. And that's what he's trying to do to EG as well. He's trying to use past events to get to EG under his shell and to break him emotionally. Yes, he may not be killing people, but he is using and manipulating people, and once he's done with them, he just abandons them. Well, maybe they might not be physically dead, but they definitely do have a spiritual death, a psychological, emotional death. So I do appreciate that as well. It's like the difference between, for example, like Han Solo being frozen in carbonite or whatever it was called, and versus like the Dementors from Harry Potter sucking out one's soul. Obviously, one is physically restrained, while the other one, while they're physically a-okay, internally, emotionally, psychologically, with the removal of one's soul, well, they're just left as a husk of who they were. And again, I would argue that currently Koski is becoming a husk of who he was. But again, hopefully he turns it around. I'm looking forward when he does. I'm pretty sure he will. Yeah, so that's what I want to discuss with that quote. I just appreciate again how EG he's confused himself. I guess what I also like is this line as well. Greed, the familiar motivator that instantly removes compassion from the equation. Suddenly, it didn't seem to matter how many people the professor hurt. So for EG, and I guess for us, the audience as well, we do have to wonder to ourselves, well, it is greed, right? Because in the last part, the professor does tell Koski that he will be the one to push forward the digital world research, the field, not anyone else. So egotistical glory, I would definitely argue that is closely connected with greed. So essentially, why is the professor acting in this way? Well, he's a greedy individual, unfortunately, and it's impacting his behavior. Moving forward, Ruzenji, you monster. I'm sick of this game of tag. It's a waste of time, especially considering I've got Postmon trapped in. Professor Ruzenji cut himself short. Postmon was gone. The smoke surrounding Doroguamon slowly lifted, revealing an empty space where Yolene, where Yunamon, and the Black Agumon stood within the stone circle. Only Koski remained at the altar, and he wasn't alone. A Tyrannomon? Where did you come from? The professor asked, simultaneously befuddled and disappointed. The creature stood next to Koski, looking concerned. Koski didn't move a muscle. What are you doing, Koski? Come on, Ichi. Oh, excuse me. What are you doing? What are you doing, Koski? Come on, Ichi whispered. I see what you've done, Ichi. Using a little Tyrannomon under cover of smoke. Very cute, the professor griped. The prominence laser blasts created just enough smoke to allow the Tyrannomon from Ichi's Digimon dock to move the others to safety. But where had they taken them? Professor Rujuji wondered. There was nowhere to hide in the source domain. the altar. So I'm not gonna lie, when I was first reading this, I did cheer a little bit. I did totally forget about the Tyrannomon to see the Tyrannomon making another reappearance in the story. As a quick reminder, this is the third time. The first time at the beginning of the story, the second time when EG uses them to help him fight against the Digipolice at the end of chapter 1, I believe. And now we have our third major use of the Tyrannomon. I'm just really appreciating how we're coming back to elements that were set up previously in the story. And I think it's very cute too how the Tyrannomon is looking concerned. Why is the Tyrannomon concerned? Because Koski is not moving. Come on, Koski, we need to go, right? Although, excuse me, the Tyrannomon aren't speaking per se. I'm sure their body language and mannerisms, in my head, it looks quite cute, and that he's very concerned for Koski. Yeah, so when I first read this, I got really excited. And I think, again, it really showcases how EG knows how to plan. He takes, again, the current situation, and he figures out which options he should take. And if possible, maybe he should create his own route, his own option, and go with that instead. So essentially, he being EG was just distracting the professor. That's why the professor even starts with, I'm sick of this game of tag, it's a waste of time. And yeah, and I think it was quite clever as well. EG was able to move everyone away from the stone circle and into the altar. And lastly, I just think it's cool how, what are you doing, Koski? Come on, EG whispered. So again, just the concern. No wonder the Tyrannomon show such compassion, because they obviously get it from EG, or in other words, maybe they both have compassion, and that's what makes them such a great team. Why they're able to work together, because they have a common mindset, common ideology. So continuing forward, Tyrannomon, Old Man Tolerance is fine where he is. Solo Logomon barked. Postmon was the main point of concern, and they were safe. Tyrannomon 1, is that you? Hide, quick. The words had scarcely left EG's lips when he heard a wet thud, followed by the Tyrannomon's pained roar. Static and noise poured from a wound and the Tyrannomon's shoulder. He never saw the shot rip through the air. How unsightly. This is no place for such weak Digimon, the professor said, breaking Duragomon out of its Duroden stance. They had honed their shockwave to a fine point, mimicking a bullet. Tyrannomon, EG cried out. Duragomon can be as precise as they are powerful. That Tyrannomon could be turned to dust if I so choose. The Tyrannomon dropped to the ground, trembling, too terrified to move. It wouldn't be able to withstand another hit from the Mega-level hunter. In fact, perhaps I will. Only this time, I'll send the entire hive instead of one little bee. Duragomon launched a salvo of focused shockwaves at the small Digimon. They were quite surprised to find themselves unharmed when they opened their eyes after the barrage subsided. They saw the fire the color of the sun and felt Solo Logomon's arm wrapped tightly around them. I'm sorry, I can't do screams, excuse me. Solo Logomon roared, grabbing at the arm that had taken the brunt of the attack. I confess I don't know what you were thinking, EG, the professor said aghast. Throwing away your partner Digimon's arm for a piddly Tyrannomon you could easily replace? Preposterous. Duragomon remained still as Professor rigidly struggled to make sense of EG's tragedy. Solo Logomon's left arm hung limp at their side. Even with the rapid fire attack diminishing the power of each individual shot, one hit from the Duroden was all it took to wreck Solo Logomon's arm. You saved my Tyrannomon, EG said softly. You saved my Tyrannomon, EG said softly. You leave my packmates out of this, Solo Logomon bellowed. So, in the same way that I cheered when Tyrannomon appeared, I won't lie, I'll be transparent. I did gasp during this part as well, especially during the little part where the Tyrannomon is not on the floor because he's weak or fatigued, but rather he's on the floor because he's scared, right? That little part. He dropped to the ground trembling, too terrified to move. That totally made me, that was a lot of pathos, a really big emotional point, and I totally did feel it. And I really did think that the Tyrannomon was going to be killed off, because I think so far the story has shown that since it's in the written format, they're kind of willing to do some aspects they don't typically do in the anime, though maybe I shouldn't say that because there has been deaths, especially with Digimon Savers, and a couple of deaths within Adventure 1 and 2 as well. But I'd argue that Savers has the most death. And maybe, I guess, Frontier with the way that it ends. I mean, the digital world is erased after all. But anyways, I really did think that the Toromon was going to be killed off, and I think that would have been quite sad. But I love how Solo Lorgamon he just steps into the foray, and I love how it's described. I wish I could see the original translation because I think it's quite adorable. The verb that was used. Let me look at it directly, or very verbatim. And felt Solo Lorgamon's arm wrapped tightly around them. So it's just the idea of Solo Lorgamon actually not hugging but clustering together with his Terramon. It's just very adorable. I wonder if that's exactly what the original translation had said. And then when Solo Lorgamon had stepped in to block the attack from hitting Tyrannomon directly. Excuse me for stumbling over my words. I did cheer again. I think I did so both internally and externally. It was really cool. And then, of course, the next passage really goes along beautifully with the way that it ends. Let me make sure that's everything I want to discuss. You leave my pack mates out of this. I think that segues neatly into the next portion. So I'll just read the last. I'll just read the last quote. It was on instinct. Solo Lorgamon was the boss of the Ninth District, after all. The threat activated the wolf-like data at the heart of the Digicore that compelled them to protect the members of the pack at all costs. You've asked if you've ever peered into hell, Eiji said, returning his focus to the battle ahead. We'll show you what hell looks like, Ruzenji, Solo Lorgamon howled. Eiji and Solo Lorgamon were synced and ready to digivolve one last time. They finally found true strength, and they were going to use it to protect those closest to them. A bright light enveloped Solo Lorgamon, and a new Digimon emerged in their place. Logomon, Mega Dark Beast Virus. And that's how part 10 ends. So at first, I didn't really like this passage. It was all instincts, but then I realized that I think that really shows how Logomon, deep down, he is a community-focused individual, because even if it was instinct, it could have been an instinct that he could choose to ignore, an instinct that annoys and baffles him. He could have told himself, why should I, Solo Lorgamon, care about such weaklings? Why should I care about people who choose to run with me and they can't protect themselves? But no, rather, he embraces that instinct and what does it say? That instinct to protect the members of the pack at all costs, and even at the detriment of their own health, and that's really cool. And I think that goes really neatly with you leave my pack mates out of this, Solo Lorgamon bellowed. Again, the choice of the word bellowed, I think that even though it is instinct, it's still Logamon's agency. He wants to protect his pack mates because he understands and recognizes that since they work with him, there seems to be a two-way street. Since you're working with me, well, I'll work with you as well. I know I've said it multiple times, but I just really like that communal aspect, and I love how Eiji, why did he reach his final step? Because he's willing to help protect Yolene, Koski, and even Tyrannomon and Solo Lorgamon. Why is he able to reach the next step where they're both able to finally, as the story states, find their true strength and use it to protect those closest to them? And it's because he being Solo Lorgamon, he's embracing that instinct that he's choosing to make part of his characterization, that he's choosing to make part of his behavior. It was really cool, and I enjoyed it. And what's so cool too is that coincidentally this week, unfortunately I don't have it on this vital bracelet. I have Omnimon, but in my working out vital bracelet, the salmon red / pink one, the ghost game one, I just got Funeral Logomon this week too, or last week I suppose. So that's really cool. I'm looking forward to transferring him. This is my professional vital bracelet. I like to put the computer Digimon here when I go out and stuff. So right now I have Omnimon, as I said, and I'm really looking forward to transferring Funeral Logomon, especially with the story and the way that it's kicking up. So I personally am still really enjoying Digimon Seekers. I can't believe there's only 2 more parts. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not going to read it right now. I'm going to wait until next week, either Saturday or Sunday morning to read part 11. And then the following week will be part 12. And then it's been announced already for the epilogue. I believe that's coming out March 9th or March 12th, somewhere along that lines. It's coming out at the same time as Digimon Con, which I'm really looking forward to as well, to get more information about Liberator. I suppose my question for everyone for this part is, how do you guys feel about Koski? Do you feel upset that he's falling into himself, that he's becoming a husk, or do you understand his point of view? And Do you think that this is it for him, or will he have his second win and get back into the fight? I'm still kind of hopeful that Tentomon and Palmon will make an appearance somehow, but I'm not going to keep my hopes up. Thank you so much as well. No one's been spoiling anything about the story. I really appreciate that. You guys are awesome. If you guys do want to spoil it, feel free to do so feel free to do so in service of discussion and conversation and discourse. I never want to stop that. But thank you for not just like, oh, Joseph, this happens and that happens. Again, you guys are awesome. I really do appreciate that. So to reiterate, what's my question for this video? Do you condemn Koski, or do you sympathize with Koski? And do you believe that this is it for him, or will he have his second win? Thank you so much for listening / watching. I do appreciate it. Have a prodigious day, everyone, and take care. I'll see you guys next week.